Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I probably didn't say that right, but nobody ever says my last name right either.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do we say your last name, Dr. Chris?
So it's Haraszti.
Haraszti. Okay, that's not that hard.
No, it's not, but it's got an S and a Z together, and so it messes everyone up.
As soon as I see it, I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna mess it up.
Yeah.
Haraszti. That's not hard at all.
Not hard at all, no.
Did I don't remember if I sent you any questions.
No.
Oh God, I've been slacking lately.
No, but that's all right. I mean, so you wanted to do a podcast on injury prevention, and that's what I do. So I don't really need, I mean, we don't really need questions. If you have specific questions, I mean, I kind of already know what I can talk about.
No, I had some questions I thought would be really great for you.
Okay. Well, we can, I guess we can go ahead and get started. So yeah, I mean, injury prevention, I mean, basically what I do, I'm orthopedic surgery. So I take care of probably most of the Jiu-Jitsu athletes in Atlanta, in Georgia, do all the MMA and all that sort of thing and cover the ringside. So I've seen, tons of the injuries and then take care of them. I do surgery and everything, but injury prevention is something that's obviously really important. It's a hot topic recently. I mean, when I say recently, last 10 years or so, but I mean, the idea is, of course, if you can prevent injuries, that's a heck of a lot more cost effective than having them and treating them. In general, I think when it comes to injury prevention, one of the things, a lot of people will think, okay, so like we'll talk about in general, but people think with athletics, okay, so injury prevention means stretching a lot, and taping and wearing protective gear. And that's kind of what they think of. They think, well, I got to warm up well, I got to stretch, wear protective gear, and that's kind of where that's their injury prevention strategy. I think one thing that we look at is kind of looking at it in a more scientific way. So you can take injury prevention and kind of, I think, look at it from sort of a bigger picture and kind of break down the different aspects of injury prevention. So, one of the things that people will do is look at sort of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that cause injury. So intrinsic would be like things that, like your stretching, your flexibility, strengthening, that kind of thing to prevent injury. And then extrinsic would be, protective gear and things that like the rules and the playing field and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to say, so if people are watching this, we're going to concentrate on Jiu-Jitsu. And and again, I was saying about the injury prevention being a hot topic. I mean, it's they're doing that in every field. I mean, it started, a lot of the early research in injury prevention was actually for ACL injuries. And there was a real, young female athletes are just really prone to getting ACL injuries. And, we always thought, okay, well, is this because their ACL is weaker or, there's some anatomic things, and there are some anatomic aspects as far as the, how big their notch is, where the ACL goes, that kind of thing. But, a big thing that we found was that a lot of it has to do with their neuromuscular training, how their knee is working in space, moving around, and they actually were able to prevent some injuries with some specific exercises. But so I'm going to basically say, so let's look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and talk about the different things you would have a strategy to prevent injuries. So the first thing I would say is that there's your area of, let's say, of your individual. Okay. So yourself, and we're talking about strengthening, stretching, specific exercises, drilling, things like that. One of the big things to keep in mind when you talk about things that you can do on your own to be less likely to get injured. Okay. So that's intrinsic. Extrinsic are things like, mouth guards, taping, protective gear, that kind of thing. And then
Okay.
let's talk about another area. So that's one, what you can do, then like things that you can wear externally. And then let's talk about another area, which is like behavior. And so behavior means like the rules. It means, maybe not rolling with risky people. Maybe it means, the coaches not pushing the person, somebody who's not ready for something in the an area that they're not comfortable with. And then the last thing I would say, the environment. You think about the environment. So when you go in, is there plenty of space for you to train? Are you training takedowns right next to somebody who's training, on the ground? Is the mat slippery and you're training takedowns? Things like that. Is there a window right next to where you're training? I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, is there a nail sticking up from the edge of the mat? That's just the idea. So it's just, there's a lot of different areas that you can think of when it comes to injury prevention that is more elaborate and more detailed and more of a strategy than just saying, okay, I'm going to stretch and warm up. So let's talk about real quick, just about the main things that you can do yourself in jiu-jitsu to prevent injury that involve your own body. So first off, it's very important to be, when we say that it's important to be flexible, I mean, people who are flexible are going to get injured. But the thing about it is, the more flexible you are, the more that you can take your range of motion before you get injured. So it's important, I think, for someone, if they're going to do like a program to help prevent injury in jiu-jitsu, I think that it's important to kind of identify which areas of your body are not very flexible. If you can't really roll back on your neck, when you're in your guard, you need to work on stretching your neck. If when you squat, you find that you can't squat all the way down with your knees on your butt, or you get real tight at that spot, you need to stretch there. So that's one thing. The other thing is strengthening. I mean, the stronger you are, the less likely you are to be injured, just because your muscles are strong. Then there's something really important. Here's a real important concept that people with injury prevention talk about, and in training in general, that's neuromuscular training. So when we're talking about neuromuscular training, so there's like weightlifting. You can lift weights and make your bicep really strong, and it's less likely to get injured. Or you can strengthen you can do squats and strengthen your quads and your hamstrings. But when it comes to sports training, the idea of neuromuscular training takes into the concept, okay, let's take the knee joint, for instance. All right, the knee joint, if you stretched, you're flexible, and you got good, strong muscles around it, it's probably less likely to get injured. But you also have to take into account the injury doesn't occur in a vacuum. The injury, your knee stability, when let's say you're in somebody has you in their De La Riva guard, okay? You've got your knee there. All right. What's keeping that knee from getting injured? It's not just that it's got good muscles around it and it's strong. It all starts with, okay, your visual cues, where are you in space, your vestibular function, so your balance. It comes from how good are the nerves in the mechanical receptors that are feeling his leg against your knee. How much pressure is right there. And then the other thing is, your own body and joints have feedback called proprioceptors that tell them where they are in space. So you kind of take all of that together. The idea of preventing an injury to the knee, for instance, isn't just making the knee flexible and making the knee strong. It's also about coordinating all of that with the feedback from your body, so that when you're in De La Riva guard, you know how much weight you're putting on your knee, how much weight he's putting on your knee, and the knee is getting feedback and keeping the right amount of tension. The quad is firing at a certain amount, and the hamstring's firing at a certain amount, and your gastrocs firing at a certain amount. It's all extremely, really complicated for that one little joint. And of course, you're doing that with all your joints while you're rolling. So where neuromuscular comes into play is if you want to do neuromuscular training, that's where it comes into play, where they talk about things like plyometrics. And, you're basically doing, like, for instance, if you do box jumps, you're training your knee to move and get stronger at the same time.
Okay.
If you do kettlebells, for instance, it's lifting weight, but it's not just lifting weight in a vacuum. You're lifting weight and having to, all the rest of your body is having to, figure out where the kettlebell is. And so it trains your body and your joints to know where they are in space, and kind of coordinates everything. So plyometrics, kettlebells, there's lots of sport specific activities to strengthen your body that doesn't just involve just straight lifting weights. So anyway, that's neuromuscular training. And to me, the biggest, most important neuromuscular training for jujitsu is jujitsu. I mean, that's the thing. So this is interesting. So, Chris Moriarty, who's a good friend of both of us, and probably one of the best guys I've ever trained with. I mean, as far as his jujitsu goes, I mean, he's just amazing. And anyway, so he's a PM&R resident. He actually was a student of mine. He actually rotated with me in surgery some when he was in med school. But so he did a paper and basically looked at, the incidence of jujitsu injuries and that sort of thing. And one of the things that they found was that people who have been, the more years of training you've had, the less likely you are to be injured. I mean, it makes sense. And here's the other thing is that you would think, all right, looking at the kind of training that a competition black belt does, the intense, crazy training, jumping around, all that kind of stuff, that those people would get injured more than some white belt who's, just going in there every week and training some, but not at the same intensity level. But who gets injured worse? It's the white
guy. Yeah.
Competition black belts, they rarely get injured. If they get injured, a lot of times it's like during competition when they are pushing it more than they should. But as far as their training and regular rolling, I mean, they can roll 1,000 hours without getting injured as compared to maybe 50 hours with a white belt getting injured. And then that's to do with neuromuscular training. So they've trained their bodies doing jujitsu to know, where they're going to be. And, if you flow with somebody who's a white belt versus somebody who's a black belt, it's night and day. And everybody knows where their joints are in space. Everybody knows what direction they're going. And so that's a huge thing. So I think that, drilling is underrated in that sense. So if you want to prevent injury, think about drilling. Drilling is a way that, drilling is not just learning the move, as I mean, there's learning the move, which is, the instructor shows the move, and then you go back and you do it 3 times and you start getting bored of it and wait for it to do the next. And then there's the kind of drilling that we'll do at, at an elite level, which is when, the competition drilling where you're doing it over and over and over again, not even thinking about it, basically just to train your body to do it. So that it happens without you thinking. It's not like you're learning the move or anything. You're just basically training your body to do that movement, like, doing a berimbolo or something like that. And flowing is the same thing, the same kind of thing where you're just training your body to do that. But honestly, so that's one thing. So I think that as far as what you can do yourself to prevent injury, stretch, strengthening, and plyometrics or specific strengthening that actually coordinates all your joints when you're moving. And then a huge one with that is getting better at jujitsu. So the better you get at jujitsu, the less likely you are to be injured. So that's one. The other thing is the things you can do, like taping, and now we're back to the stuff people normally think. So, you can tape your fingers up. You can wear a mouth guard. I mean, wearing a mouth guard is like a no-brainer. I used to not wear a mouth guard, but I eventually started doing it. I used to not wear it because I figured it would be hard to breathe. But I think once you get used to it, it's not hard to wear them. But I went for the first 7 years without wearing a mouth guard. And then, the other thing is the behavior. And that is huge if you want to prevent injury. So if I had to say, if we did this whole podcast and you said injury prevention, I could boil it all down into get better at jujitsu and leave your ego at the door. That's it.
Mhm.
If you want to prevent injuries, those are the two most important things you can do.
Mm.
So, I'd say the other one would be relax when you're rolling, don't tense up. But honestly, number one is the better you are at jujitsu, the less likely you're going to get injured. And if you leave your ego at the door and you're smart, you're less likely to get injured. And that just means, so, when do you get injured? When's the most likely time to get injured during a match?
You're fighting something off when you should have tapped out probably.
So if you're ahead 10-0 and somebody catches you in an armbar with 10 seconds left,
Oh, okay. Well,
you're pretty much going to be injured.
yeah, I'm definitely getting injured.
I mean, if you're 10 points ahead, you got 30 seconds left, and somebody, gets a heel hook,
Oh
chances
God.
are you're not tapping.
Me and Leo Noguera, we always had a rule. It's like, okay, world's finals, black belt, not blue belt or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, then you got to just take it. But if
Yeah.
it's not that, then.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you what, that actually takes me back to that match. I was actually ringside for the match with, not ringside, mat side, because I was helping with the medical team. But I don't know if you remember that match with Tammy Musumeci and who was it? It was Tammy.
Was it Mackenzie Dern or someone?
No, it wasn't Mackenzie. It was
Bia Mesquita, one of those girls.
It's the girl who used to be married to Drysdale.
I can't remember. I know who you're talking about.
She's a legend. Anyway, yeah. So I think that Musumeci was ahead, and there was like a minute and a half left, and she was in the guard, and basically the other girl from the guard with Musumeci on top ended up getting her arm and pulling it behind her back. And it was the world's finals. Mm-hmm. And she didn't tap and had one of the worst elbow dislocations on her elbow was completely dislocated. And I mean, it was like floppy dislocated, and she didn't tap. She ended up losing because she ended up having to give up the sweep. But I mean, that's some heart there. But it's not smart if you want to prevent injuries.
No.
So, but anyway, so yeah, that's the big thing is leaving your ego. So the big thing is with behavior in the gym. The times you get injured is when the new guy who's 250 pounds and solid muscle comes into the gym, doesn't know he's a white belt, and that he's you're going to get injured more often. I'm speaking from us with being really good, black belt or whatever. But the times you get injured are the ones when you're rolling with a purple belt is real strong and they happen to get a good move. And you're like, I'm not tapping. You're not going to tap. You're not going to give up the move. I mean, that's the times when, so, I think that leaving your ego is good. And really, if you don't want to get injured, the best thing is to have good training partners that you trust. But so that's the behavior thing that I'm talking about. It's just being smart about it. Don't put yourself in risky, so for instance, one of the riskiest moves that I've seen is always when you're about to get swept and you post your arm out. Right?
Yeah.
You got one arm holding everything and you're going to get swept. Yeah. I've seen so many shoulder dislocations, elbow dislocations. People get injured in that position all the time. Yeah, if it's in a competition, I'm probably going to do it. Pretty much all the rest of the time, I usually just give up the sweep rather than just keep my arm there. But you know how it is. I mean, people who just like, you can't sweep them unless you have all four of their limbs.
Yeah, you almost have to hurt them to get the sweep. Like,
yeah, exactly. So, and then it's just the idea, with the behavior too. It's like, just not being spastic, not thinking like it's the world championship. Now, again, when it comes time to competition training and things like that, you can train that hard. You have to train, like for instance, for leg locks, you can't just tap to leg locks in the gym and not tap and then have good leg lock defense. No. I mean, you really, at that point, it's more about having training partners that will push it but you know they're not going to break it if they 100% have it, they're not going. But you got to push through to that point. You've got to feel a little, might even pop a little bit. But at some point, if you're going to get your leg lock defense up to speed at a high level, you have to train where you might get your knees popped a few times. I mean, you have to kind of push it. Same thing with everything else. I mean, your arm bar defense, triangle, all that. You gotta push it through. It's actually probably easier in some ways to train and learn to escape chokes than it is joint holds, because choke, what's the worst that happens? So you go out, and sometimes people go out, but you can take it to the last minute or the last second before you tap, because with those, but joint locks you can't. So you really have to, you have to have good partners that you can roll with. And then I think the last thing to look at, again, like I was talking, is the environment, and that just has to do with, just, is the mat wet? Do you have enough room to train? Do you, you just don't want to train. Sometimes you can't help it. It's competition training. There's 50 people on the mat, but in that case, you just have to be cognizant. You can't roll like you've got the whole mat. You've got to pay attention to who's around you, that kind of thing. So, so that's pretty much it. Again, I actually came up with some rules.
You came up with some rules?
Yeah, I came up with some rules real quick. But I think the important thing is just like I was saying, just think of injury prevention as an overarching type of thing with a lot of details, and not just simply stretch, warm up. I think since we talked about it, you can see there's actually a lot that you can think about when it comes to preventing injuries. So here's my rules. Our most important rules, I think, number one, check your ego at the door. Number two, relax. I think if you're tense, you know how it is. That's why white belts, blue belts, well, especially white belts, get injured all the time. They're all spastic. But again, that comes to the rule of get better at BJJ. I mean, the thing is the better you are at BJJ, the more that when you have somebody in your open guard, you know how you are with your grips. Your grips, you're not squeezing all the time. You're not like squeezing. You like know when they're about to pull, and that's when you hold your grip. So it's the same thing. I mean, you can have your tension in certain parts of your body. The better you get, the better you are at having a lot of tension in your knee that's being used and none in your upper body, and you're relaxed everywhere else. And that's an interesting thing too, because I know people who are really good at jiu-jitsu but not good like at stand-up, for instance. They can roll all day on the mat, on the ground, and then as soon as they start working takedowns, they're dead. And whereas you have somebody who has a background in wrestling, they will do takedowns all day long, and as soon as they get to the mat, sometimes they get tired. Same thing is with stand-up boxing, for instance. If you take somebody who's a jiu-jitsu guy, I know from personal experience, but like the times I've done striking, like I'm dead in like 30 seconds because I'm not trained at it. And the thing is I'm completely tense and moving around like crazy the whole time, where somebody knows what they're doing. They're completely relaxed. They move just the little bit of their head that they need. And, it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. And, like I said, with stand-up, it's the same thing. It's, I have a wrestling background. I've never gotten really tired with stand-up and wrestling because, I'm just completely relaxed except for the part that I'm using. But anyway, so I think relax is important. I think that don't train with, at some point, you have to know how to say no. If you're talking about training with, if you're 150 pounds and you're a brown belt and there's a 250-pound white belt who's solid muscle, you probably can beat that guy. In fact, there's no doubt you can beat that guy, but there's also a high chance you're going to get injured doing it. So I mean, it's just avoiding the spastic guys that, if they're a lot bigger and stronger than you. The other thing that Moriarty's study showed was that if you are, the bigger you are a little bit, it was more protective. So
really?
Yeah. It's a big, it's all a generalization. As far as it's just trends. Big guys get injured, little guys get injured, but the other thing that was interesting about it, and it's important we're talking about injury prevention, is that it was a survey to thousands of jujitsu people, and I think the 6-month incidence of injuries was like 60%. So in other words, in 6 months, you got a 60% chance of getting injured if you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And these
Okay.
injuries can range from anything. You know, it might just be, I don't know if they counted mat burn or not, because that would probably be 100%.
That's
But,
that
you know,
is,
like
yeah.
minor injuries where you strain your knee or something. Anyway, so for rules, you know, don't train without space, tap early unless you're with a very trusted partner. Okay, here's some other ones. Beware of overtraining. I
That's
think,
a
you
big
know,
one.
yeah, I think that, you know, if your body's not rested and overtrained, you're more likely to get injured. And I put get plenty of rest, which is important. You know, stay hydrated. Consider a sports specific workout with, you know, flexibility, strength training, plyometrics. Drilling is an important rule. And let's see, you know, mouth guard, taping. Make sure you warm up well. That's about it. So, but yeah, there's, I mean, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's tons of injuries. I mean, it'd be fun for me to just go over all the injuries I've seen, but it's hundreds of different injuries. I would say the most common, I mean, I've seen everything. I've seen spinal cord injuries. I mean, heck, we had a spinal cord injury at the PANS one year in the adult black belt. That Alan Finfu, you know, had a,
Oh, really?
yeah, he had a transient paralysis actually.
Oh, wow. Well, can you tell us what happened? Do you remember?
Yeah. So I think he was going up against Octavio Sousa. I think it was Octavio Sousa, and I don't remember. You know, didn't see exactly what happened, but next thing you know, I guess Octavio Sousa could tell he wasn't rolling anymore and got up, and then we went over there and he couldn't move his arms or legs.
Oh, wow.
This was at the PANS, and maybe in the semifinals, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago. Ended up getting in an ambulance and you know, protecting his neck, and he went to the hospital, and thankfully he made a full recovery, but it took a while. It wasn't like he walked out the next day. I mean, it took a little while, and as far as I know, he's doing fine.
Yeah, I think he's up and running, winning tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's in Europe, right?
He's in Sweden, Stockholm.
So yeah, did you ever train with him?
No, but we just always cross paths, and he's so friendly, so he would always talk to me. So
Yeah. Well, you can look it up. I'm sure it's somewhere. You know, he spent a while in the hospital. But yeah, I've seen that. I mean, you know, elbow dislocations, shoulder dislocations, you know, ACL tears, MCL tears, eye pokes, head lacerations. You know, it runs the gamut. I'd say the most common thing that I see in jiu-jitsu is an MCL sprain of the knee.
Yeah, I believe that.
I mean, I think everybody who's done jiu-jitsu for 10 years or more has had one. The other,
do you know what's causing that, or what position maybe?
Yeah, it's typically a heel hook will cause it. A lot of times it's when someone has you in De La Riva. You know, that's the big one. And then sometimes it's just when you're, you know, your knee sliding, or, you know, knee slice passing or something like that. But but yeah, I would say MCL is the most common. I think shoulder dislocation is not terribly uncommon. The other most common one would be ulnar collateral ligament sprain from an arm bar. That's, you know, whenever somebody just doesn't tap to an arm bar, it happens real fast. Finger injuries happen all the time. There's actually a real important one. I'll actually mention this since we're on the podcast, but there's an injury called a mallet finger. And I've had so many people that come to me 3 months after they injured their finger, and they say, "Oh, look, my finger looks like this, and I can't straighten it."
Oh, wow.
So it's just this distal part right here. It'll look like this, but you can't make it go like that. It'll just be like this and kind of be stuck there, and it doesn't really bother you that much. If you have this is not going to get better.
Oh, no.
It's going to stay like that forever.
Oh, no.
So what you have to do is basically get a special splint and hold it straight there for like 6 weeks. But the bottom line is if you get that injury, it's usually from grabbing the jersey or the gi.
Hmm.
But if you get that, you need to go to a doctor pretty much right away and figure out what's going on. But you get dislocated fingers, that kind of thing. And, so for every injury, there's a way to prevent it. I mean, as far as all the finger injuries, if you tape your fingers, it helps prevent it. If you're not such a spaz and jujitsu, well, you're not going to necessarily get kicked in the face all the time, or you're not rolling with spazzy people.
Hmm.
For the MCL thing, for the knee, again, it's just training and getting good at jujitsu, but also not forcing the move,
Yeah.
and kind of, just rolling more relaxed and not spazzing out.
I have a good question for you.
Yeah.
Like, how have you been able to like kind of adapt your game so you don't get injured?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you have a pretty like I don't want to say unique game, but like a very like smart
Yeah.
like well thought out game plan when you're training.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, my game plan is basically predicated on the fact that I'm 50 years old and I can't go 100% for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
So a lot of my game is about slowing the other person down.
Hmm.
So it's more of a methodical game. I mean, I can roll 5 minutes hard with anybody in the world. But more than that, it's a funny story. I'm not going to name the black belt, but there's like a world-class black belt that came to one of my friends' gyms to do a seminar. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm like, 43, 44 or whatever. This guy's like former world champion. And so we actually, at the end of the seminar, we ended up rolling. We did like 5-minute rolls, and we rolled twice. And both times, like the first time we rolled, like I passed his guard.
Okay.
Or I think I swept him, and I either passed his guard or almost passed his guard, but very, very well, right? Second roll, he came at me super hard, and it was pretty much an even roll, right? So then the next day, it was the second day of the seminar, and afterwards, the guy puts everybody together to roll, and he's like, okay, 5-minute rolls, and he puts everyone together, and he goes, oh, you two are 10 minutes.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh my God. So anyway, I rolled him. I do fine for about 4 minutes. He starts to get better, and last 2 or 3 minutes, I think he tapped me 2 or 3 times. So anyway, I go to my friend after. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, man, the guy came up to me after the last trade. He said, next time you put us together, we're both black belts at 10-minute rolls.
Oh no. Adult black belt, not masters.
Exactly. So anyway, the whole point is, yeah, my game is kind of set up for that. But yeah, how do I prevent injury? So that's a very good question. And I think honestly, so I've taken off in 14 years of doing jujitsu. I've probably taken off one time for 6 weeks for an injury, another time for 6 weeks, and I think maybe 3 times for about 6 weeks each, maybe 2 months one time. And other than that, I probably haven't gone a week without training, or 2 weeks without training in 14 years. Yeah. But I think that, so for the older grappler, the secret to avoiding injury. So the first one is be an orthopedic surgeon. So the reason that that's important is because I know I know when an injury can be pushed through and when it can't. So for instance, I'm always training. Like I remember one time I pulled my groin and I couldn't hardly move my leg, and I tied my legs together and did like pass the guard drills with white belts.
No.
Like I had my legs tied together and all they had to do was pass my guard, but I stayed in shape. I think the trick to an older grappler is don't get out of shape. Because the older you are, if you take 6 months off for an injury, it's not just getting back in shape, but again, it's the neuromuscular training. It's the getting used, it's the timing, it's the feel of rolling that is hard to get back. So that's why I've taken as little time as I can off Because, you know, if I was 25, I could take 6 months off, come back, and I'd be just where I was. But,
Mhm.
you know, you can't do that at this age. So I think consistency is important. I think, you know, for me, I know when I can push through injuries, when I can't, because I know what, you know, the injuries I couldn't push through. I've had so many injuries. I've had 2 knee scopes, 3 meniscus tears, popped ribs 5 or 6 times.
Mm.
I've had a shoulder partial tear of the rotator cuff. Um, I've had a blowout fracture, orbital fracture. Had a torn retina.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, I've had all kinds of stuff, but that's in 14 years of training.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and that's in a lot of and you know, that's the thing, is that competition, you're so much more likely to get hurt. And I think that at least 50% of my injuries have been in competition.
Mm.
You know, I don't get injured in the gym that often. But for an older grappler, I think, you know, the game that you have, you know, you don't want a spastic jumping
Mm-hmm.
around type of game. You know, I mean, I think it, you know, partly is the size too, but I'm more methodical. I'm not going slow, but I'm more methodical about what I'm doing. And I'm not, you know, I'm not going to try to jump over somebody's guard or something like that. I'm going to, you know, pass through it.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I tape my fingers. And I think the biggest thing is, honestly, the biggest thing that I've done to prevent injuries is, for the most part, trust my training partners.
Mm.
I have good training partners. And if I'm rolling with people that I don't know, I'm just very careful. You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time with the ego thing. I'm the same way. If I'm rolling with some brown belt that I've never trained with before, I'm probably gonna hurt my arm if he catches me in the arm. I mean, you know, I'm still, that's the one thing that I could probably work on to get less injured, is I'm still pretty much, I mean, there's a few people that I train with, like Leo, that
Mm-hmm.
I could care less if he taps me over and over again, because he's just that much better, you know. I have maybe 3 or 4 training partners like that they're just better than me. And I just don't care. Like, I just go hard, but you know, if they catch me or they pass or whatever, I don't care. But
Mm-hmm.
every single other person I roll with, like, you know, I'm not giving up anything.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
also people are coming at you as a black belt, you know, they're not like, it's not like they're friendly. It's like, oh, this guy's trying to kick your ass. You
yeah,
know?
I mean, as you know, and you know this as well as I do, what's the toughest training that you can get? It's to walk in with your black belt to a gym that you don't know. I
Yeah.
don't care if they're all blue belts. You're still, I mean, it's, if you go into a new gym or a gym you don't train
Jesus.
that much. I mean, honestly, like, for instance, my toughest training, I'm not saying it's the best, like, it has definitely, Alliance in Atlanta has definitely been at times the best room in Atlanta or in Georgia, or one of the best rooms in the world, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not. Sometimes, you know, a lot of the best guys are taking breaks, training otherwhere, training at their own gyms, that kind of thing. But I will tell you, every time I go in there and I train, that's the hardest training that I get, because I train there rarely. If Leo's there, he'll destroy me. But good guys, because they're all a decent level, and I don't train there that much. And so whenever I train there, it's like, it's really hard because every roll is really tough. Whereas I go into my home gym, where we've got some amazing, really good guys, and I can roll for an hour and really not get that tired, because I know how everybody moves, you know. Plus, everybody else, you kind of establish, like, they don't really care. There's only like 1 or 2 guys at my home gym that are going to, it's going to be a war whenever we train, you know. So
My last question, Dr. Chris, is what is it like being a part of the medical staff for like the IBJF tournaments and also like the UFCs? Because that's like we don't get a chance to like witness that part of the the show
Yeah, yeah.
often.
So I will tell you, being part of the UFC is doing the UFC ringside is awesome. First off, just because the MMA is awesome to watch. That's the highest level there is. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the level, I mean, we've got NFC fighters that are amazing. They're going to go on to the UFC. And Bellator is probably at about the same level too, but the difference, there's a difference between a title UFC fight and it's not just the level of competition, because you've got guys fighting in smaller shows that are, all these guys, Khabib, everybody, they fought in local shows. So you've got guys, I mean, we got guys, Doug Lima, he's awesome. He's, but, he was fighting in local shows and all our guys. So you've got the level of competition. These guys are just as good. But the thing is when they're fighting in the UFC in front of that many people, they're going to die before literally they're going to die. So like the last one I did was like Israel Adesanya and Kevin Gastelum. And then on that same card, you had like Max Holloway also fighting. But that fight between Gastelum and Adesanya, I mean, I've never seen anybody take that much punishment on either side in any kind of local show.
Wow.
It's not just that the doctor would stop, but nobody's going to go through that. Like you have to, if they're not knocked out, they are not stopped. It's just the level of how beat up they were and everything, and how hard they were going is a different level. It's a different level than the local shows. Again, you've got the local shows, the talent can be just as good. You definitely have individuals that are just as talented and are going to do fine in the UFC, but when they fight in the UFC,
oh yeah.
and I mean, I don't know this as well as guys like, Rafael Assunção and these guys from Georgia that fight in the UFC. But I would bet they would say the same thing. I bet they would say that when they're in the UFC, they're basically ready to die before they give up. You know what I'm saying? It's just a different level. So UFC is just a big production. It's a lot of fun to do. And then all the big shows are like that. But, I love watching MMA. So I love doing the local shows where there's some amazing fighters. I mean, and they're super entertaining as well. But what's it like being the ringside physician? It can be a little boring at times.
Oh.
I mean, we got to do physicals at the beginning, and that's not that much fun. And then you got to sit there the whole time and fill out stuff. And sometimes the fights are boring. And then once you've done, I mean, I've done hundreds of them. So at this point, like when I first started doing it, it's so cool to be right there at the cage side. Now it's not.
It's like a Wild Bills or somewhere. Like where was it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
Being the doc, but anyway, being ringside physician's great. I mean, it's I will say at this point, sometimes it might be because they're on Saturday nights or something. It might be that, I'm thinking, man, I kind of wish it was next Saturday because I want to do something else, So, but actually once it's really fun. I mean, I really enjoy it. And it's one of my favorite things that I do is doing that. And, we see some interesting stuff, but it's great to be around the fighters. And, it's funny because, one of the people working with me just started doing it. And so she noted, so she was like, I guess, so she hadn't really been around a lot of MMA fighters. Right. And so she had not done this ringside thing and everything. And she was happy to do it. She likes it. She enjoys it. And she wanted to do it. But I think she had a different idea of what it was going to be like with like interacting with the fighters and everything. Because everybody thinks, oh, these fighters, they're all kind of mean or they're intimidating. And she's like, oh my gosh, she's like, they're all like so super nice and humble. Like she was shocked at because 99% of high level fighters or jujitsu guys or boxers, they're all like the nicest guys. I mean, until they get in the ring or, if there's something that you do to really piss them off, but for the most part, they're all super humble. And I think part of the reason that you're so humble when you do martial arts is because you've been humbled.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like no matter how good you are, you're gonna get beat up. And so you know, one of the reasons is that you've been humbled, you know the levels that there are. But the other thing is there's also that confidence that just comes from doing a martial art, that you don't have to prove yourself. You know, you're kind of already proved yourself, and you don't feel the need to prove yourself. As far as doing the IBJJF, it's a lot of fun too. I mean, I would be at the IBJJF tournament anyway. And of course, you know, whenever it's in Atlanta, I compete. I'm doing the tournament. I mean, that's a fun thing to do. Is I like to do the tournament, be the doctor and everything, and then I go right in and you know, put on the gi, and then I compete, and then come back off, and that's always fun to do. But yeah, it's fun being the ringside physician, being the IBJJF doc. I enjoy doing it.
My last question for you, Dr. Chris, is there a jiu-jitsu black belt doctors group? Because I know, like, I know you, Chris Moriarty, there's my buddy Rayhan, Cobrinha black belt, and then like Hillary Williams.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else in that group?
Let me think. So there's a guy named Wade Rome, who's a OG who helped start American. I think he started American Top Team. Was one of the founders. He's, I think, a radiologist by trade, but now he has some other business, so he doesn't do that anymore. But he's a doctor. And as far as black belt doctors, there's a radio. I can't remember his name, but there's another radiologist who trains with Diego Saravia, who's a black belt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's a few.
I had limited the black belts because, you know, if we open up to all the other belts,
exactly. Yeah. No, there's no black belt. There's no doctor black belt camaraderie, unfortunately.
But I mean, it's like, I know you compete. My buddy Rayhan competes. Chris could compete. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Chris. I think Chris is one of these guys that he's not going to compete unless he's going to win.
Yeah, well,
he could.
Yeah, I mean, he could win. Yeah,
if he focused himself on that, he could easily compete and beat 99% of people. But I think he's one that, you know, I don't know what it's like, because I've never been. You would know a lot better than me, but I've never been at the elite level. But I would think that for people who've been, you know, competing for a podium at the Worlds, at adult, I mean, it's probably hard sometimes to compete not at that level, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know. But, you know, I mean, like, you're the same way. I know you've competed before where, you know, when you're really focused in training and you're basically in that group competing for the podium at the Worlds, but, you know, and then sometimes not as into it. But it's probably hard after you've been there to just go and do like a local tournament, you know, or not even do a local tournament, do a Masters, you know. I mean, these guys that ended up going and doing Masters. There's nothing wrong with Masters. Masters is tough as hell, but I mean, but, you know, it's the question of, you know, if you've already been at that level, what's it like to sort of compete at a level down, you know? So, but yeah, so Chris could definitely still be killing a lot of people. I'm sure he's still training. I haven't talked to him about Jiu-Jitsu in a while. Every once in a while we'll text about something medical, but
I'll try to get him on here one of these days.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, Doc Chris, that's it for me.
Okay.
Let me pause it real